Hello, everyone. Today we will talk a little bit about how to use computer vision systems to improve decisions in livestock operations. And the focus of our presentation will be more on the dairy side, what's the applications we are developing and planning to implement um, in commercial farms. And we will present a little of what we're doing in our research here. So, before we dive into the computer vision and the precision livestock farming, the sensor technology, it's very important to remember why we are doing this. And the dairy farm and a feedlot, a beef cattle feedlot operation, they are complex systems because the amount of information that it's used and collected every day, uh, it's not small. And the overall goal that we have of collecting those um, variables is to have optimized decisions. That's what we want to do at the end of the day. We collect data related to nutrition, to genetics, to economics, health, and at the end of the day, what we want to do is have optimized decision, either if it's related to nutrition or if it's related to repro. But what we want to do is be precise in how we are deciding things in our operation, right? And if we look to those pictures here, we can see the complexity of the system that I'm talking about, right? So we have cows that are eating, so we need to be being in and monitoring the feed and how feed is being delivered to those cows. You need to pay attention to the body condition score and the comfort and the well-being of those animals, on the water, on the ventilation and the housing as a whole. So those images can tell a lot about what's going on dairy operation. And that's what the computer vision want to do in an automated way. It's looking to the scene, looking to the dairy barn, and with a single image, you can assess what's happening in terms of animal well-being and behavior and nutrition and so on. So that's why, and the motivation that we are implementing computer visions are using that technology to help us on the management standpoint. But the data that we have most of the time from the livestock operation, they are sparse and they are noise. And what I mean by this is that the information we collect today, and then the next information of the same point or the same topic, only in a month, will create a sparse measurements. And those sparse measurements can preclude us to develop good analytics and have this precise decision or optimized decision that we want to have in an efficient way. So here's just a quick example about how a sparse measurement is present in our operations, in the livestock operations. And the example that I picked here is a feed bank management, right? So usually in a beef cattle feedlot operation or in a dairy, we go in the morning, we see the bank, and sometimes the bank are empty. The feed bank are empty in the morning. And when we look at empty bank, the question that comes is, this bank was empty since an hour ago, right? Or 10 hours ago. How long that feed bank was empty? And because we do not have technology to monitor that in real time, we take a decision based on a snapshot, based on what is happening at that exact moment, that exact moment. So here's just a quick example of two pens, pen 6 and pen 7, they are closed, and both are empty in the morning, 7 a.m., right? But if you, in those pens, we have cameras monitoring the feed bank all the time. And if we look back, what happened the day before, we can see, for example, 4% of the time of pen 7 the day before was empty, while pen 6 the day before stayed 30% empty. So if I look in the morning and I take a decision based on the snapshot on the morning, I'm adjust the feed delivery in that day for pen 6 and pen 7, I will probably make a mistake because what I need to adjust for one pen is not what I need to adjust for another pen if I look at real-time data for the last day. the day before, right? So that's how important it is to have real-time measurement, and that's for all areas. That's for body condition, or that's for animal behavior. It's really important to have more data in terms of time series and real-time information to have better decisions. So what we are interested, it's something called high-throughput phenotyping. That's a little weird name in the animal production side, but it's very common in the genetics. And what this high-throughput phenotyping thing want to do is to collect animal level information as much as possible in a cheaper way and a precise way. Okay, and the goal of collecting this high-throughput phenotyping information to my lab is to improve farm management decisions that is specifically related to animal nutrition and health. And when I talk about the animal level information, I'm talking about those variables here: animal identification, behavior, growth development through measurements of body weight, and so on. Okay, and the way we are collecting that information is through technology. And there are several technologies that can be implemented to do this. I listed some that we are working from the research standpoint here in Wisconsin. That is the use of accelerometer or wearable sensors, computer visions and cameras. That's actually heavily most of the research that we develop, and infrared spectrometry too. So those sensors are very powerful, and they can help us a lot to collect that animal level information. And we will be using these for farm management decision, but there is a huge opportunity to collaborate with the geneticists, because they will be using those phenotypes for breeding programs. So that is a very good field to be developed and open for collaborations in that regard. So today we'll be talking about computer vision, more specifically cameras, and we'll be discussing 3 examples of application very related to animal identification, behavior, and growth development. Okay. So how we want to do this, right? We are talking about computer vision applications, and do we need to breed all of this from scratch? Do we need to invent all of those things? The answer is no. That those applications, they are being implemented in other fields, in other industries. We can see here autonomous car that is in the road of detecting the other cars and doing this in an automated way. And we have smart cities and retail and grocery stores using cameras to control what people are buying. So that is a framework, that is a field that is developed in that sense. So we do not need to reinvent the wheel. We can take advantage of other industries and bring a lot of good technology to our industry, the livestock industry. And when we think about computer vision systems being applied in animals, the first step and the first thing we need to think about it is how can we identify the animals, right? If I have cameras monitoring body condition score or body weight, before I predict that body condition score, I need to know which animal is that, right? What's the idea of that? And if we look through the US, what we have in the majority is the use of ear tags, right? Most of the time, not even RFID technology. But in the dairy side, probably we have a huge amount of RFID as a way to identify the animals. But the use of image has been very explored as an alternative, right? Because there is no way you can fraud or you can generate stress by animals. There is no human error when you have those images, and that has been explored by different groups, including our group. And we are very good to identify animals with different coat color pattern in the case of hostings, right? So we ran a trial, and we were able to identify in this pilot the animal based on the color of the coat color. The accuracy to identify that animal was very good, pretty impressive what the algorithm is doing here. The problem is so as we can identify the animals, so the question is, Now what? Right? I can have a very good prediction of animal based on the coat color. And what I can do, having those identification of animals that are housed in group as those calves here. So by having that identification, I can, for example, know if an animal is going to the bank and how long the animal is spending in the bank. So I can collect information related to the feeding behavior and the time that the animal was spending eating and the duration of the meal and the size of the meal and so on. Right. So here we have a little video that can show you how the system would work on those animals. And if we look to the accuracy to detect the visits on the bank, they're very high. Right? So now, if I have an animal that possibly gets sick or it's not eating, I can clearly see that pattern happening in the data as I have real-time information of which animal is going to visit the bank and how long the animal is spending. The problem is when we have animals with the same color, right? There is no coat color pattern that could differentiate the animals. So in the case of the jerseys, or for example, in the case of the black Angus, it is more complicated to use the image analysis to identify the animal. So what we are doing is, in this case, we are using the shape of the animal to identify the animal. So those images here, they are what we call point clouds, and that is describing the shape of the animal. But in using the shape and the biometry of that surface or of that shape, we are classifying the animals. And in this trial with 38 calves, we got an accuracy of 87%. 87% identify the individual animal based on the shape of the animal. So that's pretty impressive and very powerful to be implemented in the field. Now, the animal can change shape. And the question that arises is, how can we control for that? How precise the system will be as the animal changes the shape because the animal is growing, or because how it's mobilizing body fat, for example. So we use data from dairy calves that were growing, and we use to train the algorithms data from week 1 and 2, and we use the image from week 3, 4, 5, and 6 to generate the prediction and see if the algorithm would be able to identify those calves, even in different stage of growth. And the accuracy stayed high in that short-term period, I mean, that short period of time. We need to understand better what would happen if we would have longer periods of growth and if the animal change too much. So when we lose the accuracy and we need more image. But still in these 6 weeks, the algorithm was able to identify the animal body shape. The number of images is something very important. As you increase the number of images in the data set, the accuracy of the identification also increases. So if we have few images of an animal, it's very possible that your prediction will be bad, and that's something we need. Now that we can identify the animals, we can also do other things. And one thing that we are interested from the computer vision standpoint is monitor how the growth is happening and how is the growth developing of individual animals. And the reason we are studying this specifically is to understand the growth and use that growth information to make better heifer replacements in the dairy herd. Okay, how can we associate that with production, and how this can be used as a strategic way to do the heifer replacement? So we run a trial with dairy calves, which we collect the body weight and the image, the 3D image of those animals, and we develop an algorithm that can segment and exclude all that is not the animal on the image. We get all the best frames and we segment and only get the body without the head and without the tail. And we extract many features from that 3D image, okay? So we extract volume, area, length, extent, width, height, and we use those features to predict body weight. Right? So if we look to the association between volume, area, length, for example, and body weight, we can see a very strong association for the features extracted from the image and the body weight. So, and more important than using those features to predict body weight, it's the use of those features to understand how growth is happening. And an animal that is growing more in skeletal development compared to body fat, we can clearly see that in the differences in volume, in area, or in the height of a specific point along the body. So those biometric measurements are very important to monitor how they're growing. And the way we collect that information in commercial settings, it's in animals with the same color. In the case of this Nelore cattle, it's using RFID and the combination of the RFID with the cameras. So we have animals going to the water to drink water, and every time the animals approach the water, we read that animal, we take a picture of that animal, and we extract the biometrics that I just mentioned to measure body weight or to control or to monitor the biometric measurement of those animals. So the quality of the dairy calves that we have in terms of prediction, it's very good. The relationship between the predicted and observed is very high, and the error of prediction it's very low, and we think that will decrease even more as we add more data to our models. In this case, we had only 38 calves to train the models and 30 to validate the models. So with the experiments that we have with the beef and pigs, we have much larger data set, and consequently we have much better prediction too. So that's how we think that this can be improved. So now that we can identify the animals, and through the identification we can assess feeding behavior and also growth development, can we have more detailed information about the behavior? And that's something we're investigating too. And the answer is yes, we can. We are trying to evaluate if the animal is standing, it's lying down, it's drinking water, it's eating grain, and the accuracy to identify those activities, they are super high, they are very good. And these will allow us to have a more detailed information of the behavior. And by using that in a time series, in a real-time assessment, we can pick a small difference if the animal changes behavior. As I have images here, for example, coming every 5 seconds, every 5 seconds, I know if the animal is standing, lying, or drinking water. And if the animal drop 2% of standing time today and 5% next day and 10% next other day, we can possibly pick that small change quickly than if we would using visual observations, for example. Okay. So combining that behavior recognition and the identification, we can cross that information, and for each animal, we can have information about if the animal is drinking, standing, and then we can control those animals very well. Okay. So this is very powerful, and the change that the precision that we can see on those measurements can definitely help us to identify health issues, for example, right? And that's the goal with those behaviors prediction is how can we early detect animal that will get sick and take an action based on that information and make our system much better. So our research group, it's composed by people that are from different backgrounds. We have an animal scientist, engineer, computer scientist, and those guys were developing some of that technology, and they also develop implementing the technology. And we have a group working heavily on those development and in the analytics that goes behind that development. We have another very common type of lab in the animal science department. We have a little bit of electronics and camera work, and that's necessary for us to measure the phenotypes that we have in interest. I would like to thank the funding agencies, I mean, the USDA, NIFA, Wisconsin grant from Microsoft for the dairy calves, WRF, which is the office that takes care of the patents that we have through this computer vision application, and the other partners too. Okay. Yep. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.